What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and then today we're going to take a quick look at the data from Rishca's second tournament. So the reason I'm calling this Rishca's second tournament is I believe officially it is called Take the Initiative. And this is awkward because that's the same name as the recent league. So I'm calling it Rishca's second tournament, but it's officially called Take the Initiative, and Rishca had the name first. I just am calling it this to keep it more differentiated from the recent video that I did covering the data from season 0.5 of the Take the Initiative online league. So, with that caveat in place, let's get to the video itself. So I'm going to start off by just describing the overall field, and then we're going to look into some of the specific matchups and what I think that means for the meta. Um, when I go into the specific matchups, it's going to be a spoiler for how those games went. So if you're interested in seeing those games with commentary and so on, then I will warn you and you can maybe duck out before that part of the video. So, but we'll start off here just discussing the overall field. So what we saw here was, I think, pretty representative of what I would consider to be the mid-range meta, where in the light of the very aggro stuff that we were seeing earlier, getting a lot of results, we've seen kind of a pivot towards more mid-range builds, and that was reflected in what we saw here. So totals by leader, we had 5 players on Boba Fett, who was the most popular leader of the event. There were 14 total players. I think there was originally at least one more and maybe others, but there were people who overslept or had to drop or whatever. I know I personally, unfortunately, forgot to set an alarm and missed the tournament. I would have played Iden Red, but so we had Boba Fett and Luke Skywalker are traditionally sort of considered the mid-range kind of decks. So we had 7 of those. Then we had Krennic, Iden, and Palpatine are normally more control decks, so maybe those trying to prey on the mid-range builds. And then we did have 4 aggro decks with Leia and Sabine. At least those are how those leaders are typically used. I don't know for sure if that was the specific composition, but that does tend to be the way those leaders go. So interesting mix. Mid-range the most prevalent, but we did have some aggro and we did have some control as well. And so Boba Fett, the most popular leader and base combination was Boba with the Energy Conversion Lab. We saw 4 people using that. We had 2 people using Leia with Tarkin Town, 1 player using Boba with Jeddah City, so that's the double cunning Boba. We had a Administrator's Tower. This is the traditional cunning Sabine with a 30 HP base, which helps in aggro mirrors. Then we had ECL Sabine. Um, and 1 ECL Luke and 1 Red Luke that was interestingly running the 30 HP base. I personally favor Tarkentown for Red Luke, but I could be wrong. We then had 1 Krennic ECL, 1 Iden Tarkentown, and 1 Palpatine Tarkentown. So 1 player, I think Palpatine was previewed like 1 day before this tournament was played, but we had one bold player decided they were going to play Palpatine anyway. So shout out to, I believe it was Cryptophis or Cryptophis, I don't know how to pronounce it, who boldly championed Palpatine for the event. So 5 Boba, 2 Sabine, 2 Leia, 2 Luke, 1 Krennic, 1 Iden, 1 Palpatine. And if we look at the totals broken down by base in particular, we see a clear winner ECL. We had 7 energy conversion labs. We had 4 copies of Tarkentown in second place, and then there was 1 Jeddah City, 1 Administrator's Tower, which is a 30 HP cunning base, and 1 Kestro City, which is a 30 HP aggression base. So I think in the first run of this tournament, I think in that one there were 0 30 HP bases. I think there were actually 0. So the 30 HP bases did see some play as a potential countermeasure to aggro, but weren't as prevalent as they were in the earlier league season where people were realizing aggro was a big problem. At the same time, they did have some share of the total bases, unlike in the first version of this tournament. So now we're going to move to discussing the bracket. And if you don't want to see spoilers for this, you might want to turn this video off shortly. So I know I broadcast 1 game from this tournament. I believe that Rebel Trader broadcast 3 games from the top cut, and I think Endless had 2. And what was the other one? I'm trying to yeah, I believe Hippo had the other game. So feel free to check out those channels. The tournament game that I broadcast was my most recent gameplay video upload when this video was made. Though I will have more gameplay in the future. I will link to my own game in the video description below, as well as to any of the other commentaries that that I can find and that are, good quality and so on. So that is my sort of note on spoilers. But if you don't care about spoilers, we are about to get into the way the matches went. So if you want to avoid being spoiled on the tournament, turn away now. If not, here we go. So this is the bracket for the tournament. So we have here, um, and they're annoyingly showing some advertisements here. I don't like this. We're getting advertisements for baby formula or something. But okay. So we have let's see if I can actually zoom this in. Zooming it in does not, bizarrely, only zooming out reduces the size of the baby formula advertisements. Okay, well, it is what it is. Um, Free advertisement for a Vino baby, I guess. So we had round one. It was Sip on Boba versus Poem on Sabine. Poem did manage to get the win on that one, and so I believe that Poem's Sabine deck was the ECL version. So he was able to get the win against Sip playing Boba. Meanwhile, Thork won a Boba mirror against Zuhair Galaxy. Then we moved on over here. We had Leia versus Sabine, and his Dudeness was able to get the win 2-1 over Hippo. Um, then Boba versus Luke. Picardy third was the double yellow Boba and was defeated by Kotal's red Luke. So then Thork's Boba was able to defeat Poem's Sabine in the semifinals. Kotal's Red Luke defeated his Dudeness's Leia. And then we had a war of two mid-range decks in the finals with Thork's Boba versus Kotal's Red Luke. And Thork was able to get the win, making him the champion of this tournament. And he was actually also the winner of the previous tournament using Darth Vader. So congratulations to Thork for his strong performance in both this and the previous tournament. He switched decks, running Boba this time, and I believe that there was some discussion with him earlier where he was saying that he had shifted from Vader to Boba because he thought that Vader was like more appropriate for the meta in some sense, given that Vader, as a control deck might be in a better spot to counter mid-range, but he thought enough people were still playing aggro that he had to go Boba to counter that. And in this situation, it may have paid off for him. So that was how that went. And interestingly, we did see the other another mid-range deck, the Red Luke from Kotal, making the finals. So interesting stuff there. Interesting stuff there. Congratulations to Thork again for winning the event, and thank you to Rishca for hosting. Overall, I think that this sort of meta is reflective of kind of the mid-range meta trends that I was discussing earlier. But there's one other aspect to this meta that I think is really interesting and kind of important, and that is that when you're looking at what sort of decks are being played, green Boba is the most popular, and green Boba is the most popular in particular. But he's not totally dominant. He's a deck that was already seeing some play and is in a strong spot right now. But it's not as if this tournament was 10 Bobas. You know what I mean? It had a solid chunk of Bobas, but it was not an all Boba event. And indeed, if we look at how the different Bobas did, actually in this top cut, so in the top eight, we had four Bobas, which means that Boba did better than others in the Swiss rounds, but three of them got knocked out in round one. Now, one of those, we had one of those was a Boba mirror, but we had Poem Sabine winning against Sip, who I believe was running a green Boba, and we had Kotal's Luke taking out the cunning Boba from Picardy third. So, Boba is a popular leader right now, and he is a well-positioned leader in a meta where people seem to be going mid-range. But he is not, I do not consider him totally dominant. I think he's got some solid stuff, but he is not at all invincible. So that would be what I think about Boba in the present meta. And it remains to be seen what we're going to see as a potential counter. So we could see some more control decks trying to beat Boba. The We did not see either Krennic. The control decks here did not make the top cut. The Krennic, the Iden, and the Palpatine. So not sure how they did there, what their matchups were exactly. I only have this for the finals. I guess the group stage. Yeah, so we had okay, so here's some data from the group stage. So it looks like Palpatine was defeated by Luke, Palpatine was defeated by Sabine, Palpatine was defeated by Boba, Palpatine won against Iden. So Palpatine is a weird deck. He's very interesting. So the thing that I think about Palpatine is that he is a very strong leader in a control mirror. But I think that he is much more vulnerable to aggro than some of the other control decks, even compared to like Vader. He's just very slow. And, I think he can be quite strong, but you have to figure out how you're going to stave them off in the early game. That's really the key question. And, sometimes people were not able to do that. Iden also, I think, did not necessarily have a great day. Lost a game to Boba, lost a game to Krennic. Lost one to Luke, and actually also lost to Palpatine. That's unfortunate. Red Iden would have been the deck that I would have played myself. I haven't looked exactly at Copycat's deck list. Somebody said it was different than mine, but I don't know. It's quite possible. Copycat might have a better deck list and just have had some unlucky matches. Hard to say. Um, it's always kind of tough to tell how exactly those things pan out. And then Krennic was defeated by Boba, won against Iden, was defeated by Luke, and then won against Boba. So interestingly, the Krennic deck there with Rebel Trader winning both its matchups against Boba, but losing to other decks. Um, and overall, I think that with this sort of meta, I would be looking to try to figure out some kind of control thing that can beat the Bobas while also not folding to aggro. And that's actually why I think Iden is well positioned right now, and I would have played Iden in this event. Because if you have so the traditional like kind of matchup triangle that you'll hear about from players who've played Magic the Gathering or stuff like that, and this is not like the only thing, but traditionally people say that aggro beats control, control beats mid-range, and mid-range beats aggro. And another way that you may sometimes hear people say this is that you want to either be way faster than your opponent or a little bit slower than them. Because if you're a little bit slower and heavier, you can be countering their plays with things that are that little bit above theirs and getting more value. But if you're way faster and someone else has these slower and heavier plays, you can beat them before they get to their end game. So I think that right now a control deck that has the ability to hold off some of the aggro builds, ideally through healing or strong early control options. I think in particular of like blue villain, I think has some good options in that area. So I think Iden and Krennic both have a fair amount of healing and access to cards like Make an Opening that can be very useful against control. Um, or I'm sorry, very useful against aggro, and then can play big ships and stuff in the late game, or other large units from green or red, or even Avenger and stuff like that in blue, and using those options to kind of try and get control of the game. Um, so those are I think decks that might be well poised for this environment. Boba Green, of course, is sort of the deck to beat. It's a good deck. If you're running Boba Green, I think there's been recently some people have been thinking about what to do to counter the meta. So we've seen cards like the Steadfast Battalion, I think was a card that started getting integrated into some builds in order to potentially ambush and defeat an opponent's Boba Fett. Um, a few other things that might be relevant there. I know in the game that I cast between Thork and I believe it was Thork and Zuhair Galaxy in the finals. Um, Thork did very well with Traitorous and was talking about that as being a good card against Boba in particular in the comments. I think he was saying that most Boba players are running Waylay but not other attachment removal, and Traitorous is really well poised against cards like Boba Disintegrator or Seventh Fleet Defender. So that can be a very interesting option. Anyway, I think that is going to about do it for this broadcast. So that was the tournament, and those are some thoughts of mine on the metagame as a whole. And yeah, thanks to you all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.